of former NBA players, former gamblers, pretty much exposing the WNBA referees, NBA referees. This
whole situation is getting pretty wild. Carmelo Anthony just broke down how the league really works behind the scenes. And honestly, his words hit different when you look at everything that went down with the Indiana Fever this season. We're talking about former players straight up exposing referee emails, rigged games, and these super shady officiating patterns that make you question everything you watched. The WNBA might want to just gloss over this. But trust me, these NBA veterans are not holding back anymore. So what do you think? Did the Fever get totally screwed by the refs this season? Or is everyone just making too big a deal out of it? Drop your thoughts below.
Thinking that this whole gambling thing is just going to go away within a snap of a finger. I'm here to tell you, this is the worst possible thing that could have happened for the WNBA, and especially the NBA, bro.
Look, let's just get right into this, because what's bubbling up right now could be the absolute worst thing for the WNBA. Especially since the league is finally getting all this well-deserved attention. You've got former NBA players stepping forward with these wild stories about referee manipulation. They're talking about actual league emails, telling officials how to call games, and even gambling connections that just make everything seem super dirty. And when you take all that and look back at what the Indiana Fever went through this season, suddenly all those really questionable calls and bizarre patterns start making a lot more sense.
To show you guys today. In these videos, some of these videos are from the past. Well, majority of them are from like the past, but they're talking about things that is happening today. Pretty much for warning us. And these ain't just regular people. I'm talking superstar basketball player Carmelo Anthony. Superstar NBA champion Rasheed Wallace. Exposing everything. But Rasheed Wallace was the one who really lit fire.
Carmelo Anthony actually sat down and shared his experiences with the former commissioner David Stern. And seriously, what he described sounds like something pulled straight out of a crime movie. Apparently, Stern kept detailed files on players. He knew where they lived, who they hung out with, everything. And he wasn't shy about using that information as leverage. Melo himself got a 15-game suspension for a fight, when everyone else involved only got 6 or 7 games. When he asked why, Stern basically told him he was being made an example of. The NBA was watching everything, knew everyone's business, and used it to control players. If that's how things went down in the NBA, why would anyone think the WNBA operates any differently?
That's why I was just saying, as I got older, I didn't have to do all the cussing or come with attitudes. No, I'm just hitting them with logic now. Like, oh, so y'all got that email last night, huh? Oh, then they flare all up. What are you talking about? Oh yeah, I know about your email. No, let's not forget that. I know about that. But man, look, it's been an ongoing
you're
war.
Referring to emails from the league with, this is what we discussed in Whistleblower, but emails from the league that are telling the referees to officiate the game in a certain way and against certain players.
Yeah.
And so you were cognizant of that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it definitely gets crazier. Rasheed Wallace actually took this even further. He talked about actual referee emails coming from the league itself, telling officials how to call games and which players to specifically target. He even said he used to tell the refs right on the court that they were making it too obvious. He knew fans could see what was happening, and that these blatant calls were just slowing down games and killing the whole entertainment vibe. Wallace knew all about these emails instructing referees to officiate in certain ways, and he wasn't scared to call it out even back when he was playing. So that's not just speculation or some random conspiracy theory. That's a former NBA champion saying the league was actively telling referees how to influence games.
What would you just say? Y'all making it too obvious.
I thought he was crazy.
Y'all making it too obvious, too blatant. Y'all making it too obvious. I said, y'all want the fans to be able to watch the games, but y'all sitting up here calling a lot of these bullshit calls is doing what? Slowing down the game. Y'all want the fans to see the dunks and all that. Yeah. So
now let's take all of that and apply it to what happened with the Indiana Fever this past season. Honestly, all year long, the officiating against them was questionable. To put it mildly, Caitlin Clark would get absolutely hammered out there with no calls, while a defender could just breathe on an opponent and suddenly they'd be at the free throw line. The inconsistency was so obvious, and fans noticed it immediately, but then all of a sudden, in the playoffs, the whistle just changed. The Fever actually started getting calls, They started advancing, and guess what? The league got the exact matchups and the ratings boost they were desperately chasing. To me, that doesn't sound like natural progression at all. That really sounds like someone just flipped a switch because the business side of things demanded it. That semi-final series against the Aces was probably the clearest example. Aaliyah Boston, a player who barely ever fouls, fouled out in a game where at least half of her fouls were seriously questionable. The officiating in that series was so heavily stacked in Vegas's favor that even casual fans were calling out the obvious disparity. The Fever fought their way into a position where they could have potentially made the finals, which would have been huge for ratings and overall attention. But it really looked like the refs made sure that didn't happen. Or maybe they made sure the Fever got that far in the first place, just to pump up the hype, before eventually protecting the established dynasty team. And that's where this whole thing gets really interesting. Some people think the league totally screwed the Fever all season long. Others believe the league actually helped them in the playoffs to boost those ratings. But the wild thing is, the reality might just be that both of those things happen. Maybe the plan was to let Caitlin Clark struggle a bit early on to protect veteran players and avoid the whole narrative that she was getting preferential treatment. Then, once the playoffs kicked off and ratings became the absolute priority, suddenly the whistle changed to help the Fever advance and create those compelling matchups. Then, after they served their purpose of generating all that hype and attention, the officiating swung back to eliminate them before they could actually win it all. Listen to this. Former referee Tim Donaghy, who actually went to prison for his role in a gambling scandal, is now saying that what happened in his case was just the tip of the iceberg. He claims the FBI initially wanted to indict 6 or 7 other people, but that investigation was shut down from the very highest level. Apparently David Stern basically ran the investigation himself and made sure Donaghy was painted as one bad apple, so the league could move on without any deeper scrutiny. Donaghy even says the guy who headed that investigation took a job at a law firm and immediately got all of the NBA's outside legal counsel work. That's not just a coincidence. That's a payoff for killing an investigation that would have exposed some seriously systemic problem. Now the FBI is even investigating another situation involving John Tay Porter and allegations of players sharing information about injuries and availability to people who then placed bets based on that inside info. So, this isn't just about one player or one isolated incident. This is about patterns of behavior that strongly suggest gambling interests have infiltrated professional basketball at multiple levels. And if that's happening in the NBA, it is absolutely happening in the WNBA, where salaries are lower, financial pressures are even greater, and the incentive to make money on the side is even stronger. Rasheed Wallace's comments about those referee emails are particularly damning when you think about the Fever's season. He said the emails would tell refs to call games certain ways and to specifically target certain players. If that system truly exists, and Wallace pretty much confirms it does, then it's not hard at all to imagine those same emails going out about Caitlin Clark. Like, don't give her calls, let defenders be super physical with her, make sure she doesn't get easy trips to the free throw line. Then, later in the season when ratings become the priority, flip that script, give her calls, help the Fever advance, create all that drama in those storylines that casual fans will absolutely tune in to watch. The WNBA Finals this year had the best ratings in a long time, and a huge reason for that was because the Fever made it far enough in the playoffs to create sustained hype and attention. Even though they didn't make the finals, their playoff run generated enough buzz to carry over into the championship series. That's exactly what the league needed, and the timing of when officiating helped versus hurt the Fever fits that narrative perfectly. They got just far enough to serve the league's business interests, without actually threatening the established order by winning it all. Carmelo's story about David Stern knowing everything about players' lives is also super relevant here, because it really shows you just how much control the league exercises over its athletes. If the commissioner knows where you live, who you associate with, and what you're doing when you think nobody's watching, that creates an environment where manipulation is incredibly easy. Players can be pressured, officials can be directed, and outcomes can be influenced, all while maintaining plausible deniability because officially everything is on the up and up. The gambling aspect just makes everything so much worse, because now you're not just talking about the league manipulating outcomes for competitive balance or entertainment value. You're talking about criminal enterprises potentially having influence over officials and players through debts, threats, or other forms of leverage. Tim Donaghy actually said the mob had their claws in him and would have never let him stop providing information. He thought he'd give them picks for 3 months and then be done, but the FBI told him he was their golden goose and they would have killed him if he tried to stop. That's not sports. That's organized crime, and it's not just about NBA referees making too. WNBA officials make significantly less, which means the financial incentive to take money from outside sources is even greater. If you're a WNBA ref making $70,000 or $80,000 a year, and someone offers you 20 grand to make sure certain calls go certain ways. That's a huge percentage increase in your income. The temptation is real, and the league's complete lack of transparency about officiating just makes it so easy to hide. The Fever situation is suspicious for multiple reasons. Beyond just individual calls, the pattern of officiating changed dramatically at times that were super convenient for the league's business interests. Early season, when the narrative was all about protecting veterans and not giving preferential treatment to the new star, Caitlin Clark got hammered with no calls. Mid-season, when ratings were struggling and the league really needed to create compelling storylines, suddenly the calls started evening out. Playoffs, when maximizing attention and viewership became absolutely critical, the Fever got just enough help to advance and create drama. Then, in the semifinals, when actually winning it all would have disrupted the established power structure, the calls clearly went back to favoring the dynasty team. That's not random variance. That's a pattern that strongly suggests someone was making decisions about how games should be officiated based on what served the league's interests at different points in the season. And if emails were going out to NBA refs telling them how to call games and which players to target, like Rasheed Wallace confirmed, then it's incredibly naive to think similar communications weren't happening with WNBA officials. The Aaliyah Boston foul-out situation is still one of the most egregious examples of questionable officiating this season. She's one of the most disciplined post players in the league. She doesn't have a history of foul trouble, and suddenly in a crucial playoff game she fouls out on a series of touch fouls and questionable calls. Meanwhile, Aces players were clearly getting away with significantly more contact on the other end. The disparity was obvious to anyone watching, but nothing was done about it because officially the refs are beyond reproach, and questioning them too loudly gets you fined. That system of protecting officials from accountability is exactly what allows manipulation to thrive. If you can't question calls without getting punished, if there's no real review process for patterns of bad officiating, and if the league consistently backs its refs regardless of how obvious their mistakes are, then there's no incentive for those refs to be on it. They can take money from gamblers, follow directives from league emails, or just favor teams they personally prefer, and as long as they don't get caught doing something as blatant as Tim Donaghy did, they'll never face consequence. The Fever's massive social media value, which was revealed in recent reports, makes this whole manipulation angle even more plausible. The league knew Caitlin Clark was generating $55 million in social media value for Indiana. They knew she was driving ratings, attention and engagement at levels nobody else could match. That makes her incredibly valuable for business, but also potentially threatening to the established order. You can't have someone come in and completely dominate immediately, because it makes everyone else look bad and totally disrupts the carefully managed narratives the league has built about parity and competitive balance. So maybe the plan was always to let her succeed enough to generate massive attention, while making sure she faced enough adversity to prevent complete dominance. That would totally explain the wild inconsistency in officiating. Sometimes she gets calls, sometimes she gets mugged with no whistle. Sometimes the Fever get favorable officiating, sometimes they get completely screwed. The lack of consistency actually serves the league's interest in creating drama and storylines, while preventing any one player or team from running away with things too easily. Carmelo's point about the NBA being part of the feds is also super relevant because it shows just how deep the surveillance and control really goes. If the league has that level of information on players, and isn't afraid to use it, then controlling narratives and outcomes becomes much easier. You know which players are vulnerable to pressure. You know which officials might be open to outside influence. You know which coaches will play ball with league directives, and which ones will resist. That information is power, and it can be used to shape outcomes in ways that serve the league's business interest. The timing of Adam Silver going on Pat McAfee's show right before all this FBI gambling investigation news broke is also incredibly suspicious. Silver was clearly trying to get ahead of the story by talking about the need to regulate gambling and control its influence on the league. But if the league already knew what was coming, which seems likely given the timing, then that appearance was pure damage control rather than genuine concern. It was about creating the narrative that the league takes this seriously and is being proactive, when in reality they were probably scrambling to minimize the fallout from revelations they knew were about to drop. For the Fever and their fans, all of this just creates legitimate questions about whether they actually got a fair shake this season. The officiating patterns were just too convenient, too aligned with the league's business interests at different points in the season, to be purely random. Maybe individual refs weren't taking gambling money or following email directives, but the overall pattern truly suggests someone was making decisions about how these games should be officiated based on factors beyond just enforcing the rules fairly and consistently. The fact that former NBA players are now speaking openly about referee manipulation, league emails directing officials, and gambling influence should absolutely terrify the WNBA. Their league is newer, less established, more financially precarious, and just more vulnerable to these exact same problems. If it was happening in the NBA with players making millions and refs making hundreds of thousands, it's definitely happening in the WNBA, where everyone makes less and the financial incentives to cheat are even stronger. The truth about referee manipulation and league control is finally coming out from people who actually lived it. And the WNBA really needs to hope this doesn't spread to their officiating, because the fever situation already looks suspicious enough.